Alright, so listen, this video is a remake of a post I made on my Instagram in late August of the previous year. While the post itself is solid, the main reason I'm remaking it is to build off of the original post and add some new pieces of evidence that I've discovered since then. Moreover, I want to address, or more precisely, explain something I haven't seen many people talk about. For the sake of trying to keep this video short, I'll give a brief rundown on how it is structured. First, I'll explain how the cosmology came to be before moving on to explaining why it's likely that the Soul Society and the living world are around the same size. After that, I'll cite numerous pieces of evidence which indicates the size of these realms before going on to point out something that not many people talk about. This video will mainly focus on the Soul Society and the living world since Hueco is kinda irrelevant. But with all that out of the way, let's get into it. In the third Can't Fear Your Own World novel, it's explained that at one point in time, all of creation was in a state of ambiguity where there was neither life nor death, and progression and regression flickered to and from while the world supposedly increased and decreased in size. This would continue for 100 million years before the world would cool down and eventually Hollows became part of the soul cycle. However, it wouldn't take long until Hollows began devouring humans, which caused the circulation of souls to cease as it appeared that all souls in existence combined into a menos grande. This caused the world to become completely quote-unquote still, which I'm presuming means that there was no cycling of souls. But then, new life came into existence. It was as if the natural world rejected what the existence of the Menos Grande represented. The first of these beings was the Soul King, and it appeared as if he destroyed the Menos Grande, causing it to become nothing more than a mass of spiritual sand, which led to the re-emergence of the cycle of souls. Alongside the Soul King, there were others who appeared and possessed special powers. But the Soul King stood out amongst those that possessed special powers, since his powers were near omnipotence and omniscience. The Soul King then began annihilating Hollows in order to protect others and stop the world from entering stagnation, i.e. to maintain the cycle of souls. Due to the Soul King's actions, the world slowly sank into chaos, with the reason as to why this happened never being explained, to my knowledge at least. Either way, there were 5 people who did not agree with the current state of the world. These 5 people were strong, but not as strong as the Soul King, and were the founders of the 5 great noble houses. Each of them had their own reason for disagreeing with the current state of the world. Some were afraid the Soul King would use his powers against them, while others believed that it would be better to purify Hollows rather than outright destroy them. Either way, it led them to one conclusion: to split the current world. Maybe another form of the world would be born, but what was necessary was a distinction between the world of the living and the world of the dead, alongside the sand paradise that would be a destination for the Hollows both worlds produced. In order for this separation to become a reality, they required the powers of the Soul King, who was tied up and sealed within a crystal. Then, using his almighty powers as a keystone, the foundations of the new world was created. This new world consisted of the Soul Society, Hueco and the living world. Where life and death finally separated, a new era was ushered in due to the soul cycle. To summarize everything I just explained, the world was originally just one large universe, but they wanted to separate it for a variety of different reasons. Due to this, the Soul King was sealed and his powers were used to divide the world, which resulted in the creation of the Soul Society, the living world, and Hueco. This explanation on how the new world came to be implies that either one of the 3 realms is around the size of a universe, or all 3 of them are multigalactic in size at least. But let's continue. Now I'll explain why it's likely that the Soul Society and the living world are around the same size. The reason for this explanation is that if I can prove one of the worlds is a specific size, then it's obvious that the other realm would scale relative to said value. So let's begin. The Soul Society and the living world are depicted as being 2 halves of an oval on numerous different occasions, such as in chapters 46 and 492. While one can say this is referring to the number of souls each realm possesses, the souls are in reference to the contents of the scales, while the scales themselves are the realms. This is why it says that the universe will tilt to one side, even though the correct translation isn't universe if not world. In one of the Can't Fear Your Own World novels, it's explained that you can visualize the realms as planets. This is noteworthy because when looked at from a cosmic scale, planets are generally relative in size. In one of the data books, whose name is unknown to me but is probably the Mass data book, it stated that the realms are 2 sides of the same coin, and that the worlds are parallel. The term sides of the same coin is generally used to refer to two things having notable differences but being related to each other in some fashion and having some similarities. On the other hand, the term parallel has many definitions, but within this context, the definition that fits best is the one in reference to two things being similar or having similarities. Moreover, the term parallel world is just another way of saying parallel universes, and is generally used to refer to an entirely separate self-contained universe. In chapter 625, Yoruichi makes a diagram of the living world and the Soul Society, and in said diagram, they appear to be around the same size. It's very clear that these realms are depicted to being similar in nature and around the same size, so let's just move on to explain how large they are. Now that I've established that it's likely that the Soul Society is around the same size as the living world and vice versa, let's move on to laying out all the evidence which support these realms being universal in size, going from least solid to most solid. I've already cited pieces of evidence supporting that these realms are universal in size, such as the statements about parallel worlds and about the history of the New World, so while I won't mention them again, just keep them in mind. Firstly, in the poem for Volume 10, Kuo makes reference to the existence of Mars. The poems themselves have no direct relation to the contents of Bleach, at least I don't think so, but it can work as supporting evidence to the fact that both Jupiter and Saturn are depicted in chapter 19. The reason we know it's Jupiter and Saturn is because we see Saturn's rings and Jupiter's great red spot. Moreover, there's also a reference to the existence of the universe. Secondly, at the end of chapter 84, there are references to outer space. Thirdly, in the second chapter, Orihime was reading a book called The Encyclopedia of Stars. Fourthly, in chapters 1, 2, 148, 672, alongside some others I don't quite remember, it is shown that the living world and the Soul Society have a day and night cycle. Moreover, it is also shown and implied that the Soul Society has stars. Fifthly, at the end of chapter 125, Kon states that he kicked the pebble to a distant galaxy. While this is hyperbolic, it implies that there are galaxies within the living world. Given it states, quote-unquote, a distant galaxy, we can loosely infer that Kon is in a galaxy. Thus, the one he is referring to is different from the one which houses Earth. Moreover, the existence of a distant galaxy can be interpreted as loosely implying that not only are there galaxies that are near, but there are also multiple galaxies, as it states a galaxy rather than the galaxy. Sixthly, in chapter 578, Grimmy used his imaginary powers to create what is said to be outer space. Here we see a galaxy alongside numerous stars within this realm Grimmy created. Whether or not you believe Grimmy's skills to this, created its contents, or just created a portal, doesn't matter, since it implies that the concepts of stars, galaxies, and outer space exist within Bleach and Grimmy could conceptualize them. This hypothesis is more plausible as it is supported by evidence I've already gone over, and it makes less assumption than saying something like Grimmy created the concept of stars, galaxies, and outer space. And lastly, at the end of episode 311 of the anime, we see the camera zoom out from Earth and we are shown a galaxy surrounded by countless stars. Take a look.
活躍で町は平和を取り戻した。だが、五郎の魔の手は虎視眈々と唐倉町を狙っている。行け、唐倉イザー。君たちの戦いは。
Taking everything I said into consideration, it's evident that the Soul Society and the living world contains countless stars and multiple galaxies rather than just being planets or just a solar system. Even if you want to downplay it and say that the living world has a mass of 2 galaxies and a bunch of stars while the Soul Society just has multiple stars, it wouldn't be consistent with the origin of a new world since it doesn't account for the rest of the mass of the original universe. The only way you can account for it is by saying that it was transferred to Wakamundo or something. But it wouldn't make sense for the Soul Society to transfer the vast majority of the original universe's mass to Wakamundo, since only Wakamundo the planet is inhabited. While one can argue with technicalities, it just makes far more sense for the mass of the original universe to have been divided and transferred into thirds of a whole, making each realm multigalactic in size at the bare minimum, rather than one realm just being orders of magnitudes larger than another. Now something I want to talk about is how the proper nouns of Soul Society, Living World, and Wakamundo aren't just used in reference to the realms themselves, but also the planet of the realms. Allow me to cite some examples. Firstly, in chapter 245, Uyo states that Wakamundo has an atmosphere, which is something limited to planets. Secondly, in chapter 371, Baragan basically states that Wakamundo has a sky, which is just another way of saying atmosphere. Thirdly, in one of the Can't Fare Your Own World novels, it stated that the character shoots a sailor that cuts through the Soul Society's sky. As stated previously, the word sky is just another way of saying atmosphere. Fourthly, in chapter 618, Aizen states that the Soul Society has air. As you thought, air is just another way of saying atmosphere. Fifthly, in chapter 686.5, Shunsui states that when Shinigamis die, their bodies are reclaimed by the soil of the Soul Society. The term soil is generally used to refer to a layer of a planet's crust. Sixthly, I don't know which chapter this scan is from, but the term Soul Society is used to refer to the government or the people of the realm rather than the realm itself. And lastly, this one is more of a speculative manner, but listen. In the Memories of Nobody movie, it stated that the Valley of Scream has connected the Soul Society and the living world as it allows the inhabitants of one to see the other realm. But when this is actualized, it is just showing the planet that the Serete is situated on and Earth. This is noteworthy because if these realms are multigalactic in size, then the chance of this aperture specifically linking Earth and the planet the Serete is located on is astronomically low. In the same movie, Urahara states that a town from the living world appeared above the Serete. This is due to the connection created by the Valley of Screams as previously explained. The thing I want to highlight is that he says quote unquote a town from the living world. Like, while this is technically accurate, it sounds kind of weird if he was referring to the entire realm. Like, imagine if I said Tokyo, a city from the Milky Way, appeared above the Serete. Yes, this is technically true, but it isn't something you generally say, and most people will look at you weird if you said it. Of course, this is something subjective rather than objective, and alone it doesn't really mean anything since it's just an opinion. But when you have it together as a package deal with all of the evidence I've presented, it makes far more sense for Urahara to be referring to the living world as a planet rather than the entire realm. On top of this, the events of the entire series hardly ever deviate from the planets of the realms. Like, why do humans and hollows just reincarnate on Earth? If you have this vast realm, then why is there just activity on this infinitesimal fraction of it? This is explained in chapter 46, where Rukia states that the souls released by the Soul Society are born into earthly creatures. But this still begs the question as to why Earth is the only place that has such a level of significance in the living world. Using all of the evidence I laid out alongside some speculation, it's evident that these supposed multigalactic constructs aren't multigalactic in size, if not just planets. But if this is the case, then it's in direct contradiction with all of the evidence I went over in the previous section. Thus, the conclusion I arrived at is that the words Soul Society, Living Worlds, and Wakamundo are homonyms. Homonyms are words that are similar to homophones, but they differ in that homonyms have the same spelling or pronunciation, but different meanings or origins. For example, the word bat can refer to both a baseball bat and a bat as in the mammal. This would explain why there are references to the words referring to both the planet within the realm and the realm itself. For the most part, this makes everything consistent. In conclusion, I believe that with the evidence I've presented, it's evident that 1. The Soul Society and the living world are around the same size. 2. The Soul Society and the living world are at least multigalactic constructs, as we have seen multiple depictions and references of stars within both realms, with the living world having galaxies, and if the first conclusion stands, then the Soul Society will have galaxies as well. Moreover, due to the fact that these realms came about due to the division of an original universe, supports that they are multigalactic in size. 3. There are several statements and norms within the series that seem to imply that the realms are just planets, which is in direct contradiction with the evidence of them housing galaxies. This can be explained by saying that the proper nouns of Soul Society, Living World, and Wakamundo are homonyms and refer to both the realms themselves and the planets within the realms. For the most part, this makes everything consistent and it explains away the supposed contradictions. And yeah, that's about all I wanted to say. Bye.